Good evening, students. I am Anju Sehgal Gupta. I am one of your teachers, and I'm really glad to be here with you. Today we decided we're going to not strictly keep to our course, which is, teaching strategies. So we're not going to really cover different aspects of the course that we normally do, but to take you a little beyond to new things that are happening and new things that you can do in your classroom. So our topic is critical literacy and critical reading and critical literacy, and I am so very glad to introduce Ms. Shefali Ray, and she's an expert in this area, as in several other areas of ELT. She's an ELT expert, and today she has very kindly agreed to come and discuss this new area, in a sense, new to many of us. And in the course of the discussion, if you have any questions, please do telephone immediately, and she'll be glad to answer them. So, welcome, Shefali. Very glad to have you here. So, let's sort of begin from the beginning. What is critical literacy, Shefali?
Critical literacy is basically stems from the critical social theory, that this world of ours is not an equal place, inequitable. There are inequities here, that there are people who are treated differently. Everyone doesn't get the same opportunities. There are distinctions and differences are made. There are differences made in gender, between gender, man and woman. Yes. There are differences made in races, white and non-white. There are differences made in caste, like in our country, or even class. You know, would you know that this concept of distinction in society and what this actually influences what the people will learn, what the people will read, what the people will have the right to look at or pursue. It dates back to the time of the Greeks. The ancient Greeks believed that the study of philosophy and the study of the liberal arts, was only the prerogative of the rich, and the prerogative of the kings. And the common people, they were to study the 3 R's, the reading, writing, arithmetic, and some kind of a training. They were not supposed to be doing any kind of study of philosophy. So the concept, the division happened even in curricula. That is one thing that critical theory wants to look at, is whether the curriculum given to any kind of learners is top-down, where the ideology is imposed, or there is certain kind of an end product they are looking at as citizens, or is it bottom-up? The aim is to make it bottom-up.
Which is the learner also has
to say. Learner has to say, and it basically is based, it just takes themes which are generated by learners and from learners' experiences.
Okay, so it's a very learner-centered philosophy.
Very learner-centered philosophy. It stems from them, basically it's something, and for them.
Okay.
And then there's the concept that we, in society, we develop identities. We all have our identities, and we shape our identities, we develop it with our actions, with our words. And we do it in a world which is already pre-decided, which has already pre-decided what identity we are going to have.
Yes.
That means that there's a world already shaping us.
So there's a tension between the identity we wish to have and the identity which the world wants us to have.
And the world is in fact building us. So critical literacy wishes to have learners, helps the learners to think for themselves and rethink and decide what kind of identities they would have, or maybe even change their status if they wish to.
So actually critical theory helps to make the learner autonomous, which is one of the key concepts that we have tried to talk about in CTE courses as well.
Autonomous, free thinkers and critical thinkers. Because critical thinking is very important in critical literacy. You need to be able to judge things for yourself, interpret it in your way, look at the depth and the underlying currents of meaning to find out what exactly is, presented to you as form of text or learning.
And so from the teacher's point of view, it would suggest that the teachers should not be just mere classroom teachers. They should be educators.
Yes,
Right.
They are not mere classroom teachers, they are educators in the sense that it is not what the text apparently seems to give and say. What are the constructs or the ideas in the text? I mean, you just try to interpret, okay, between the lines, but you need to interpret beyond the lines.
Okay.
That is what a teacher needs to. We need to help them look at themselves, look at society, look at their local perspective, look at the global perspective,
Yes.
and then look at ourselves, we look at ourselves in that perspective and then consider things.
Okay. So we question ourselves, we question our surroundings.
We question received knowledge, the knowledge that's coming to us through text.
Okay. Okay.
And of course, the good thing is the world is still not finished. We have still not finished making the world. We can change the world, we can change the reality. So critical thinking, critical literacy helps learners to rethink, decide to reshape their identities, and basically it all stems from questioning the received knowledge, the knowledge that they get, how they question. Let's look at these points once.
So
Yeah, we look at these points. Philosophy, the points is it's an inequitable word.
Can we have the first slide, please?
We can have the first slide. Let's look at the distinctions exist on the basis of gender, race and caste.
Can we have the first slide, please?
We develop identities.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we have the first slide?
Right. I'll repeat. It's an inequitable world. The distinctions exist on the basis of gender, race and caste. We develop identities through our words and action that build us. The world is not yet finished. It's not just humane. It's not just or humane. The world is not just or is it humane. Fortunately, we can redefine ourselves and remake society.
Let us see if we can get the slide. Can we get the slide, please, at the production end?
We just sum up the points that we have looked at, what exactly critical literacy is and where it stems from and what are the aims. Okay, let's go further to aims of critical literacy.
Okay, so what are the aims of critical literacy?
Okay, aim, yes, let's look at the aims. The aims, one, is basically to create a critical consciousness. A critical consciousness amongst the learners. Now, how does one do it? By critiquing, critiquing, questioning received knowledge, and looking at any kind of text that comes to us as being influenced by social and political factors.
Okay, I think we've solved the problem.
Yes.
So let's go back to the first slide.
The previous slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were talking of philosophy of critical literacy. So here the points, the basic points.
Yes.
The world is not a just place. The world has inequalities, iniquities, there are distinctions, and we develop identities not of our own volition.
Yes.
But rather, there's so many other people who are building it for us.
Yes.
And but luckily, the world, fortunately, is still not finished, and we could still remake ourselves. We can remake society.
Right. So it's a very dynamic kind of philosophy.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And looking at ourselves in the perspective of society and at the microcosm and the macrocosm, the global perspective.
Yes.
Let's look at the aims of critical literacy. The first one is to critiquing, social and political problems which influence any kind of writing.
Okay.
You see, no kind of writing or text is neutral
Yes.
or natural. It has to have some ideology, it has to have some leanings, and it has to have some message which it tries to give. It tries to give some message, or it would have the reader understand the message in a certain way.
Okay.
Right? So to be able to question, to be able to see what are the underlying undercurrents, and try to look at it critically.
All right.
Okay. Now, once you have looked at for example, there was a study done where school children were given some school books to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And they were asked, I mean, they didn't belong to the elite class. They were asked, okay, look at the pictures, look at the children illustrations, and what kind of children these are.
Mm-hmm.
How are they similar to you? How are they different? They found the children were similar to them. They played. They loved their parents. They liked to be with friends. They liked to read.
Mm-hmm.
The difference was they found that the children in the book
Mm-hmm.
were very clean, very healthy, very pretty,
Mm-hmm.
and they lived in big, beautiful houses.
Mm-hmm.
So when the children were asked, why do you think this is? They said, perhaps the illustrator wanted a pretty book.
Oh, okay.
And they thought, perhaps, the children said, perhaps the illustrator they made it so that children nice, pretty, healthy, in good houses, because it's happy thing, and children like to read to know happy thing, so perhaps they did it that way. You know, critiquing, the kind of writing. Well, if we as adults look at it, we would say that perhaps it was an elite class addressing an elite class or representing only the elite class and not the worker class or the classes which you call subordinate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having done this, learners learn how to think of alternatives.
Yes.
If this is not so, what could be done? So alternative children could suggest, well, to take this discussion further.
So let's go back to the slide, please. Let's go back
Yes.
to the slide.
Posing in alternatives would be, perhaps the children could say they present children from poorer homes
Mm-hmm.
with smaller houses. Maybe children are dirty sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. And the next point that we look at is very important, is we do not receive the meaning as we think the author wants to give it. We construct the meaning.
Yes.
We construct the meaning, and how? Not where the teacher is in authority, not where the teacher is interpreting and teacher is giving her or his interpretation. It is a power sharing classroom where the learners are all putting their heads together and they are constructing the knowledge which is based on their own knowledge which they have learned, based on their experiences and their perspectives. They construct meaning. So there's a likelihood that in different classrooms the same text would, different meanings would emerge.
Absolutely.
Multiple interpretations would emerge.
Depending on the situation, depending on the kind of students and the kind of teacher.
Yes.
But the point that the teacher needs to remember is that the texts do not have one meaning. That's one point. It is a dynamic text, and that they should share the power. So it's not that I have a meaning and I'm the teacher and this is the meaning that you have, that the students should pick up. You know, a lot of teachers expect the answer that they've given. So that's a no-no, right? According to this theory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, and by looking at something critically, looking at it in their own perspective, redefine themselves and question the knowledge, whatever's coming in. Don't take it in as it is, as a plain truth. There is nothing called universal truth. Because something which is true for somebody may not be true for another person. Something which is good and noble and the wise thing to do for somebody may not be for another person. So we look at it, different identities, different people, different interpretations. So then let's look at the next slide.
Let's look at the same slide actually. Should we just go over the rest of it? Do you want to go over the rest of it? Constructing meaning and development
of critical consciousness. Right. Basically, again, critical consciousness is ability to question, ability to think critically and decide on what it means, basically constructing the meaning. And ultimately, we are creating aware, critical thinking and discrete individuals, redefining identities. That means because I'm a worker class child, that doesn't mean that I remain so. I can do various things and I can be treated in a different manner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Now the question is, you might ask, Anju, then fine, this is good. This talks a lot of its social theories in it, but where does language come in?
Yeah, and how is it relevant to the teacher? How is it?
Yes.
So
now, I would like to talk about Dewey, what Dewey said. Dewey said that language used by self is a social activity.
Yeah.
For in society we need to use language.
Yeah.
And Then how do we use language? We use the theory that we have learned. What is the theory that we have learned? Is the information we have gained through books and different sources. And then we have another kind of learning, which is our experiences. We use our theory, we use our experience, and when we are addressing any text or anything, any written material, we work out the meaning for ourselves based on our experience and what we learn, and the purpose. We also work out what is the purpose of this writing. Why was it written? When was it written? What is it aimed to do? So that is all through language. Without language we can't do it. You know, we think with language. So language is very, very integral to critical literacy. And of course, language is used for constructing knowledge.
Yes.
We need language for that.
Yeah.
And we need language to nurture democratic citizens. Because unless you communicate, unless you can communicate what you think, your opinions, your feelings, and share your ideas, you don't build a democratic society. So basically you build through communication, through language, you develop democratic citizens. And well, there's another school of thought is that language cannot be taught in itself in isolation. What is language? It is words. Certain words have certain meanings, and certain words have different meanings in different contexts.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Like what you say, words which are called polysemes. We have different meanings in different contexts. Language carries along with it the culture, the history of the country or the place where it belongs.
And the social differences.
And the social milieu.
Yes.
That means it carries also attitudes, biases, ideologies, and some social constructs. They come with it. And language is also a means of, changing reality. Changing reality is basically when I discuss, when I argue, and I try to convince the other person. No, this is not only one way of looking at it. There's another way of looking at it. Look at it from this angle. What am I doing? I'm creating meaning. At the same time, I'm changing the reality, the apparent reality of the text or whatever is under discussion.
True.
So language has a very, very major role to play.
Yeah.
And then Dewey also said that children are natural language users. And you say that if we do not allow them to express their feelings, their opinions spontaneously, and we try to, impose on them our interpretations or we are looking for a certain answer, what are we doing? We are rather demotivating them, and then they don't have any cause to communicate.
Yeah.
If they don't have a genuine reason to communicate, then we find in the language class they're struggling, they're grappling to read and write because, that basic impulse to communicate has been, you can say it has been discouraged in the class.
Okay, so what do we tell the teacher? We tell the teacher is that let the children grow spontaneously, let the class be noisy, let the children say and not be scared of the teacher. So it's an anxiety-free classroom that we encourage, that the teacher and the student share power in the classroom, and that the student is allowed to think independently.
They're allowed to think independently, and perhaps if an interpretation is being given by the teacher and a student thinks otherwise, based on experience, should be able to say it
and it should be
and
accepted.
Work it out, and it should be accepted.
Yeah.
It should be accepted by the teacher.
Yeah.
So basically, there is no black and white. There is no total right or wrong. That means teacher and the students together build the answer.
Yes. So the teacher is just the learner, a learner among the learners.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now let's look at the methods that a teacher can. Basically, the end aim of this is to create a critical consciousness. So let us see quickly. We'll run through some of the methods that the teacher can use, or the methodology or the pedagogy of using of methods, so that we develop the critical thinking amongst our learners and develop them into critically conscious citizens.
Yes.
Okay, let's look at them. Okay, next one. First one, let's quickly run through them. One is the bottom-up approach. The bottom-up approach is basically the opposite of the top-down approach.
Where the teacher is the powerful one.
Teacher is the powerful one, the curriculum framer is the powerful one, and the curriculum framer decides what the learner is to learn.
Okay.
And the curriculum is coming down to the learner loaded with values, loaded with preconceived notions, loaded with ideology, because no curriculum is natural or neutral.
Yes.
Then the second one is using dialogue. Dialogic methods of discourse, using dialogue, where traditional classroom, well, let us all admit, I think we are all also that is basically the teacher one-way monologue.
Yeah.
Teacher monologue.
Yeah.
But no, it is a dialogue where the students in a democratic setup have the freedom to express their opinion, express their interpretation of a text, or what they see as meaning of a piece of text, or what they think, or what meaning they would attribute to something. So it's kind of a dialogue. So what is happening now? The teacher comes down from the pedestal. Now you are co-learners, co-participants. You are discussing together how or what meaning seem to emerge. And here there's not going to be one. There are going to be multiple meanings depending upon the kind of students or the learners in the class. The next point is power sharing.
Can we have the, yes.
Power
Can we have
sharing.
the slide, please?
Let's have the slide. Let's look at the slide.
Yeah.
Power sharing. The teacher no longer in authority.
Yes.
Teacher co-participant, learning along with the learners. And teacher may have come to the class with an interpretation in mind, like we all have, we are all individuals, but teacher might go back from the class with a redefined interpretation. That's the children help. So what is happening? The students are now becoming, they are becoming agents of social change. They're becoming co-teachers, because when they're discussing in groups, they are teaching each other.
Yes. And
they're influencing each other. Maybe influence teacher also.
Yeah, and they're becoming thinking individuals.
Yes, they're becoming thinking
individuals.
So it is power sharing. So teacher is no longer in total control, or the sole authority is sharing of power.
And that would lead to a democratic way later on, because they would be thinking individuals who would later contribute to society.
Yes, and they would contribute meaningfully.
Yes.
Because once they're allowed to express, children become responsible learners.
Yeah.
You know, autonomy automatically leads to responsibility.
True.
You know, if truly it's done. Then, as I already said, now if there is a power sharing, if their interpretations are encouraged, then what happens? There will be multiple interpretations depending upon the students. Now consider for example a class where the teacher is discussing in say critical literacy, which she feels that she would like to encourage critical literacy. So she's talking about a famous brand, you know, the brand jeans and t-shirts and all that students love to wear. Now the teacher wants to discuss that this brand, which is so popular, so expensive, actually has a sweatshop philosophy, where it has workers who work long shifts, live in hovels, they get the minimum wages and they suffer from deprivation.
Yes.
Now if there is a class, it's a mixed class. You have some well-to-do children, you have some poor children. A child whose father or mother was working in a factory, industry, would certainly empathize with what the teacher is saying. And consider on the other hand the well-to-do children who sport that brand, they love to buy that brand. For them it will be a little difficult to come down from that, you know, that elevated position, the brand, to come down to the position, think, oh, is that so? That is happening behind the scenes. So it can lead to multiple interpretations and multiple responses. There may be anger, there may be resistance, there may be different kind of responses, and teacher will have to handle that. So it puts the teacher in a much more dynamic but responsible position. And of course, it's very important that the teacher should be a knowledgeable person. True. Because the teacher has to provide argument, counter-argument, discuss, point, cite instances. So if the teacher is knowledgeable, he or she will do a wonderful job of developing this kind of a consciousness among the learners. Now, the next one, of course, we talked of is inquiry and questioning. Question. Don't take anything that comes as it is. Question.
But look
Why?
at the underlying assumptions,
Yes,
in other words.
and for example, if it's a story and it's a lesson based civic lesson on in civics, for example, I'm moving away from language teaching and say there is a class presented, a middle class presented, a family. Now the question may be, why is the middle class presented? Why not the poor class?
Yes.
If you're talking of the family as a unit. This question may arise. So questioning why only one certain class is represented, which means now you go back to the author, you go back to the curriculum framer, and you go back to the educationist and what they want to do. And which is most important is a kind of, mutual development. I know you may have heard, you may have read about when Vygotsky was talking about the zone of proximal development. They call it ZPD. Zone of proximal development is the idea that a less developed individual in the company of a more developed, more advanced individual, or in interaction with more developed individual, achieves things which he or she couldn't have done on her own.
Yeah, which is very interesting because it goes on to this whole business of modeling that we talk of in ELT, where if you model excellence, then there is a very good chance that you will also get part of it.
Yes.
So you can connect it with modeling.
So the teacher is the more advanced person, or there may be other learners.
Other role models, absolutely. There can be other role models.
So the learner learns, is pulled forward, progresses in the company of a more developed person. But in the critical literacy, in the context of critical literacy, it is not only the learners, it is the teacher also benefits.
Yes.
Basically, it is a development not only for the learner, for the teacher as well. Yeah. So all develop. So it is a mutual development, because teacher may come, as we were saying, with some knowledge. That knowledge may get modified by the time the teacher leaves the class, because the children are adding their own knowledge. So student resource is a huge thing which teachers need to tap.
And also what I'm sure is happening in critical thinking and critical literacy is that one is suggesting that one looks for excellence, when one talks of modeling, or when one talks of this whole business of that if you model yourself on excellence, you will get part of that. So you then start looking for excellence. It's something which the teacher will train the students and train herself. She has to be trained herself before she can train her students.
Yes, and when she is discussing, there may be some students who have certain knowledge on certain thing, or their opinion, they bring in opinion which the teacher had never thought of. That perspective. What they bring it, the class becomes richer with more perspectives, more ideas, and a multiplicity of interpretation. And again, there is, if suppose I were to read a story or a piece, normal in traditional classroom, there is one way, a set pattern of looking at it, set pattern of interpreting it, set pattern. But critical literacy encourages unfamiliar connection making, drawing connections, relating to things, and unfamiliar reflection, thinking upon it from a different angle. Not so far, not thought of, from a totally new angle, look at it from a new angle and discover the truths, or discover the things, the meanings in it.
And which makes the activity types very interesting.
Interesting, yes. Because there are surprises, there are a lot of surprises in this kind of a thing. And I would like to just tell you, Anju, this is not of course reading, this was one of my experiences in storytelling, where I'll tell you very, very briefly. It's a story of a princess who is really loved by her parents, and she has very long hair, and her hair grows long every year. And her hair is so long that 100 servants need to clean and wash her hair. But she's looked after by her parents, she's showered with gifts and loved by her parents. But the poor girl cannot walk much, she cannot run about, she cannot play, because her hair is so long and her head feels heavy and she has a headache whenever. So she sits at the window. And of course the story goes that the father declares if her hair touches the ground from the top story like Rapunzel's, he would throw a feast and he would marry her off to the best person in town or whatever. Now the story was being told to class 3 students of her school. The comment would be, how do you like the story? Did your parents love her? Yes, they gave her gifts, they looked after her, they spent a lot of time with her. But there's one little child who got up and said, no, I don't like, with a frown, I don't like her parents. They were mean. So why? But she couldn't play. They didn't allow her to play. And then another child came up. Yes, if her daddy wanted to have longer and longer hair, because daddy could say, my daughter has very long hair. You see how the perspective changed?
Yes.
Now there's one more child. Again, we were talking of theory and experience. With experience is they all love to play. They love to move about, run about. So they find it is really painful for a little girl or a young girl, not little girl, she wasn't so little, she was to be married off, a young girl to be restricted to a window.
Yes.
Then knowledge came in, theory came in, there's one more child got up and said, yes, her rights as a child were being not given to her.
Oh,
recently they had learned something on the rights of the child.
Yeah.
And so, they connected, they made connections and they said the rights. So I thought this is where it happens.
Yeah.
And so ultimately we say that critical literacy is a kind of a social action.
Yes.
It is itself a social practice, and it is a social practice which is used to study and critique other social practices.
Yes.
Social practices, political practices, etc. Right? Now let's look at some questions that a teacher may ask in a class of critical, or class which the teacher wishes to develop critical literacy. Let's look at the slide. Let's look at the questions. Well, a critical teacher may ask these questions. How are meaning assigned to certain figures or events in the text? That means, what do these people stand for? What do they represent? Is this event a desirable one, not desirable one? Is this character a good one, not good one? Is it person shown in positive light or not? The second question is, how does it try to make the reader accept its constructs, the ideas? That means the author deliberately chooses words and expressions to convince the reader that what he or she feels is right. And it does that, which is called partly rhetoric, which is persuasive writing, or even not rhetoric. Third is, what is the purpose of the text? Is it propaganda? Sometimes you look at some advertisements or propaganda material, you can see that their words are carefully chosen to brainwash or to, make an individual think in a certain manner.
Yeah.
Then another question is, whose interests are served by the text? Interest of the institution. If the institution talks about is a report of what great things the institution has done, whose interest does it serve?
Yes.
The readers, society, or the institution? Or if it's a story or a kind of piece about the well-to-do people, so whose interests are served? The well-to-do people. If it is a piece written for and by the common person, so it's the interest of the common person. Whose interests are not served by the text? Now let's go back to the little children who were looking at the pictures of pretty children in big houses. So we can certainly say that the interests of the poor children were not being met.
Yeah.
Or in our story of this little girl with long hair, the interest of a child was not being served at all. Because the child likes to be happy, to be out in the open and to move about and run. The next question the teacher may ask, what view of the world is put forth by the ideas in the text? What view of the world? Clean, nice children, this is a nice picture. Right, wrong, good, bad, desirable, undesirable. All that. What is the view that is presented by the text?
But what was interesting is the avoidance part of it. What is not put forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And something that discreetly swept aside, they're not even mentioned. And unfortunately, in many places, they are the people who are on the fringes of society, people who are in the considered to be subordinate classes, the working classes. But of course, it's not so. Many textbooks do take care. Of course, a good textbook writer, but many a time this happens.
And you can also know whether it's just lip service or whether they actually...
Yes, it could
because
be.
you see in lots of texts it's just lip service.
It could be just lip service, yes, it's just because it has to be there.
Yeah.
Kind of a recipe that you should have this and this and this, so perhaps, yes.
Yeah.
And Another question, the last one, which is the most important, is what are the alternatives?
Yeah.
How else could it have been portrayed? How else could it have been presented? So these are the things that basically the learners know, that the writer in writing worked upon certain assumptions. There are certain biases which the author could not, get rid of. Or the author is trying to serve a certain purpose. Now, if it is an advertisement for Mother's Day, or a kind of a catalogue of what gifts you can give to your mother, and it's a catalogue of all kinds of pretty things, cosmetics and things, now what happens? Who is it addressing? It's addressing people who can afford to buy these gifts, children who can afford to buy. Where will they get the money from? Obviously from the parents.
So not the mother really.
No, okay, not the mother, but from the parents, maybe from father. Or maybe,
no,
maybe
what I'm trying
money.
to say, it's not addressing the mother, the love for the mother. It is addressing
It is
something.
not addressing. This again I was reading up, and then the learners worked on this. And they said, okay, if the person who's written the catalogue, then why should you print such a glossy catalogue, spend so much money? Now think, he wants to sell.
Yes.
And the more people see it, the more it'll sell. So ultimately it is economic. It's a business for the person who wrote the catalogue. Now the children sat and worked on this. It is, suppose we did not buy these gifts. How would we show our love to our parents? So from this discussion, now what was the alternative was? Alternative, Mother's Day, supposed to be a day where mother knows that we love. So you can do many things. And there's a famous story called A Christmas Morning, where this boy, Rob, he is very poor. He can't give, he buys his father a very cheap tie, doesn't like it, wants to give him something good. He works on a barn, but they works on the farm. He doesn't go to school. His father gets up very, very early in the morning, cleans the barn, milks the cows, washes the pail and keeps all kinds before he wakes him up. He gets up early, very, very early, when it's still dark, does all father's work for him, and that is the Christmas gift for his father.
Yes.
So, redefining.
Yeah.
Redefining the concept of gifting, making a person think how you love them.
Yeah. So that's the way, that's what we are trying to do, show alternatives, right?
Yes. And I would like you to go through a text very quickly and think about the assumptions, biases, etc. And perhaps in the next session, we will look at it more closely. Life with Matilda, Aunt Matilda.
Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah.
So Life with Aunt Matilda, is this a story that you wrote?
Yeah, it's a part of a story that I wrote, yeah.
Okay. So I woke up in an unfamiliar room. I discovered I was on a huge rosewood bed. The sun rays fell on its dark varnish and the wood shone like dark garnet. My mind was still fuzzy and I drifted off.
Let's look at the next one.
The woman seemed to be talking to a small girl.
No, I was awakened.
Okay. I was awakened again by a sound. A woman who appeared to be an au pair girl stood in the hallway. An au pair girl is basically a sort of a glorified maid.
Oh yes, but earlier days they used to be, people
like a governess.
Like a governess, but they used to, come to learn a language.
Yeah, I know.
And not being able to afford, they would live with a family and help them.
Yeah. So a woman who appeared to be an au pair girl stood in the hallway. What struck me most were the baubles around her throat. One or two of them caught the sun rays and glowed bright green and blue. This must be the au pair girl, I told to myself. The lady of the house would certainly not be caught dead in such loud and tacky ornaments.
Look at the derogatory way the author is saying it. So the narrator. So we can make out from here, the lady of the house would certainly not be caught dead in such loud and tacky ornaments. Baubles, the word baubles. Again, what is it showing? It's showing a class consciousness. Perhaps it is again the interest of the elite. Obviously, perhaps the story might change. But here, this text, it is the interest of the elite and she is a working class. So it is a kind of a derogatory term. So the author possibly has used. Well, I wrote it. Well, I didn't mean to undermine, but story changes differently. But the language is used. to take home a point. That's the author deliberately does. Okay, let's read next. The next paragraph. Yeah.
The woman seemed to be talking to a small girl. I raised myself a bit to look. It was a girl of about 5 years. She was bare feet and in a chemise. I wondered whether the girl was freezing in her underclothes. The little girl seemed to be fretting. She did not want to say goodbye to her governess. The au revoir seemed to be taking long. The woman also seemed a bit upset. I wonder what was up.
So this passage shows the perspective of the child towards, of course, the child does not share the narrator's viewpoint. And the child loves the governess and she is crying because she doesn't want her governess to go. And is apparent from here, goodbye means perhaps the governess has lost her job. Now let us see why. Next paragraph.
A shrill voice rang inside the house. I do not want such bohemian lifestyle for my aides. They get into trouble themselves and have such a bad influence on my children. Imagine drinking and dancing with the driver and the gardener till the middle of the night. I think I can manage the household and the family myself. A lady shouted shrilly inside.
Again, we are looking at, again, whose interests? The interests of the rich.
Yes.
And the worker or the girl, the au pair girl, is looked upon as a troublemaker.
Yeah.
As dancing. Now, we can have multiple interpretations. Well, perhaps the lady of the house who dances and drinks in the middle of the night. But, yes, for her, it is not done, it is not acceptable because she was dancing with the driver or the gardener.
Yes.
Perhaps this girl has a driver for a brother. Then she doesn't consider this as coming down as the lady of the household. So there are multiple ways of looking at it. And now what happened to this girl? Let's look at it, then we'll discuss it a bit quickly. Look at the rest of it. Just a very small, short paragraph after this. Couldn't we look at the paragraph, please?
All right, everything is all right now. She has been given her marching orders, hasn't she? A stentorian voice followed. The man came out. He walked up to me. Isn't this my granduncle, I asked myself.
So she has been given her marching orders. Marching orders means she has been asked to leave. And on what? Because she was drinking and dancing till the middle of the night. So there are certain social norms. Well, the question is, who decides the norms? For whom? And if, fine, we accept, suppose she made a mistake, she shouldn't have been doing that, but is this the answer to her mistake, that she be asked to go away, she being fired? And do you think that the child, little girl, shares a mother's view? And look at the pompous, I'm just going back to the former aids. Look at the aids. The word aids is of course very pompously used. It's a very, it's not actually relevant here. So this shows how pompous the rich lady is.
Yeah.
Or perhaps she is a senior officer or she has aids. But, well, and look at that. I would not like any bohemian lifestyle. Whose interest? It is not in the interest of the working class, because it is here the assumption is that the working class people are indiscreet. She is indiscreet. And she is indiscreet, and they may have a bohemian lifestyle, many of them, and then they get into trouble.
Yes.
Is that true? No, not always.
Absolutely.
And it could be true anywhere.
Yeah. So Shefali, I think this was a wonderful, explanation plus theory. And so it was theory as well as example, and thank you very much for your time as well as your views.
Thank you.
And your, this great discussion on critical reading and critical literacy, which more critical literacy. And I'm sure our students who are actually teachers would have got a lot out of this. Thank you very much.